Mr. Thorn, thank you for joining me on this fine Sunday here, coming from both sides of the coast, on the west side, one on the east side. We have actual things to break down tonight, which it's probably tomorrow if you're watching this, but we have actual things that have happened. We haven't talked in a minute, since we talked about the first round of UFL signings. We're actually not going to talk about UFL to NFL signings. We're going to talk about our, I would say, third attempt at actually having a draft class. Is that fair to deduce that?
Yeah, I guess so. If I think and that's something we'll definitely get into. But the USFL draft and then the XFL last year, kind of sort of were a thing because of the merger. There were some issues there. I wouldn't blame you if you just said this is attempt one and just forgot. Got rid of those two. And the differences there will be interesting to break down. But yeah, I'm excited. It's something to talk about. We'll get into it.
Yeah, 100%. And I've actually written to the league about this and never got a response. But what's up with draft rights? Because in my opinion, I know last year, Anthony Beck was like, "Oh, you're signing my players with Gary Jennings," and I couldn't. But at the time when Gary Jennings was signed, it was two separate leagues, so I don't think Anthony Beck has the argument there. And then Potter throws a terrible response where he's like, "Well, you signed Darius Shepard or something like that." Whenever he signed a USFL player to an XFL contract, I'm like, you guys are both arguing about the same thing. But then Potter goes and signs a general who the generals are still a thing, like whenever he signed them. So I'm kind of like, doesn't really make that much sense. Remember
it's even
league?
better.
Yeah.
In December, Pita Tamapuenu signs with the St. Louis. And Vegas technically existed and held his rights. I think that was all just like Vegas waived it or whatever. Like he's a free agent, whatever. I think that's a lot of merger issues that were one and done. At this point, it's like if you own the rights, you're the team that owns them. There's less weirdness there. You don't have to deal with teams that are about to not exist. So, I think that's part of the reason why the last drafts just weren't as good as they could have been. And we'll see. Obviously, we'll break it down a lot. But, I think this one, at least as far as like, continuity goes, it'll be a little bit more straightforward to follow than some of these other ones where like guys get drafted by one team doesn't exist anymore, and now they're on some other team. Like, this will be a lot – just like the offseason as a whole, it'll be a lot cleaner than it was last year, for sure.
Well, it's given us something to talk about. And first and foremost, what did we think about the actual draft? Like, did we like how it was a Twitter and Instagram post? Do we want someone just streaming, like maybe a live stream on YouTube, and it just pops up? It doesn't have to be fancy. And then you have someone, like, they don't even have to say anything. They just pop up the card, a highlight of them, and then moving to the next pick. Like, I feel like the draft was done the night before.
Now that's interesting. I don't know. I think that you might have a case there on being the night before. I haven't really thought about that, honestly.
You gotta make the graphics. And like if you look at some of these tweets are terrible tweets. Like you could tell who's still full-time on the payroll based on the tweets. I'm just saying.
Yeah. As for like, should the draft be a bigger deal? I would argue with the rookie draft, I wouldn't. Like, I'd much rather the NFL cuts draft that's supposedly happening. That's a much bigger deal because, like, there's a decent chance. I don't know the exact number, but like, it's well over 50%, probably closer to 70 or 80% of the guys drafted are currently on teams. So you think probably at least 40-50% of the guys who got drafted aren't going to play for teams. So that like kind of takes some of the excitement out of it. Like, to me, this was much more of a procedural thing than necessarily like an event that has, because like if you're in the NFL, you watch your guy take it, or you watch your team take a player, and it's exciting because you now have that player. Whereas with this, it's like, well, it will be exciting if this guy fails to make an NFL roster. So at least there, it's like, okay, they're free agents. If they get drafted, there's like a pretty good chance, a better chance than what's it now because they're a free agent looking for an opportunity. But yeah, like in general, I find that the rookie draft doesn't make a ton of sense anymore with the way they structure it, because before the XFL rookie draft was only free agents, and the argument was like, we're giving these free agents, I forget the exact wording they used, but it was like, we want them to work towards, the XFL season. And that's great, and that's a way to justify a rookie draft and another event on the calendar. But for this, it's like, okay, why wasn't just these guys in the regular draft in November when you know who's available and who's not? I say that, but also there is an argument of like, there's a lot of interesting strategy here, which we'll get into, of like who you're taking, because there's more players to take, and depending on where your team in your franchise is at, can vary wildly on who you're taking and the caliber of player that you're taking. So there's a lot to break down there. I don't think we're ever going to get a TV, NFL draft style event in a spring football league. I just don't think there's enough interest there, frankly. You'll get an Ari Menarov tweet or like a little bit of traction on social media, but are people really going to get so excited that they're going to tune in? Obviously we will, but like, is Joe Schmo going to? I don't really think so. So I don't think that's very realistic, as much as it would be a cool thing for the league to have.
Yeah, I mean, even it just kind of sucks that it falls on the responsibility of the independent content creator to do anything to give these guys a 2-minute. Obviously, Reed did something. Rico knows this something, and then there was a couple smaller channels that I hate, as I am a smaller channel, I've not even heard of. And this is a small community. I think Zom Fox did something. I'm not really sure. But what I recommended is, if I'm the UFL, this is my content strategy. From July, I go hard with the showcase content. I go hard with my signings. The XFL last year did a good job, like making the workouts seem a lot cooler than they really were if a player got a workout during the summer. August, I highlight and spotlight my UFL players who are playing in the preseason games. I blast their content and whatnot. September, I go back into 2022, 2023, my signings back then. I highlight now because I can Cavante Turpin, Brendan. I can highlight the 2022 USFL guys, the 2023 XFL guys. And then that's when I have my draft would be whenever practice, like after week 1 would be my practice squad draft, because then I could use, my UFL draft, because then I could use my, also my clout, for lack of a better term, and my content I got from my guys who made the roster. And also NFL or UFL teams could realize, okay, my guy got cut. Jalen Redmond got cut. Hey man, do you want to come back? Okay, you still want to wait, but if you don't sign, okay, now we know we don't have to draft a defensive end if we wanted a Jalen Redmond to come back. So I have the Birmingham Stallions. I have their picks on my screen right now. And like you kind of said, I don't really want to go into that they signed or drafted Frank Crum. Oof, that was a mess up. Frank Crum. I'm going to go into the fact that they took 4 offensive tackles, a running back, a receiver, a tight end, two receivers, 1 defensive end, and a quarterback. So they went 9 on offense, 1 on defense. What do we make of that?
To me, this reads like a team that already is loaded with talent, drafting in a draft like this, where they are going, they're going for home runs, And, maybe they go 1 or 2 for 10, but they're getting 2 really good players if you end up getting that sort of thing. So, and part of that is you look at it, they're taking 4 offensive linemen there?
Yeah,
I believe. Yes, 4.
All tackles, yeah.
Yeah. And when you're doing that, I think that reads into it even more because it's like, well, if we hit a home run, we'd love it to be an offensive lineman because that's a position that's hard to get, right? Going after a Sam Hartman in the 9th round, to me, also, that's probably the biggest example of that, of like, this dude got the highest signing bonus in the NFL for an undrafted player. There's no way that Washington's cutting him. If they are, I would be concerned for him as a player. Something's wrong there because why are they cutting this dude? And even if they cut him, why aren't they having him on the practice squad? Why isn't he getting some other opportunity? Realistically, this feels like maybe 2 to 3 years if things don't work out for Sam. Maybe he takes the UFL, but in general, to me, I don't even want to spend a ton of time on them because that's they are taking guys who are probably a little out of their, range, and they're hoping that they luck out on some of these dudes.
So obviously with Birmingham, we have seen the last 3 years that this team continues to put out 3 different quarterbacks, 3 different running backs. Who's the guy? Receivers, whatever. They go 10 for 10 as far as signing guys who are on NFL squads right now. Granted, are they all going to be? No. But to me, Birmingham, it's obviously a long-term play. This is a formality thing. It didn't really matter who they picked up or whatnot. Obviously, Sam Hartman is the big sexy pick and whatnot. But in my opinion, I don't foresee any of these guys making the transition this year because Potter, I think his spreadsheet, his Google Doc is so ridiculous that these guys are on it behind 3 or 4 other guys who I'm more excited for the UFL free agent signings than anything else right now. But that being said, Hartman definitely, it would be pretty hilarious to move on into the next phase of Birmingham quarterbacks. We're going to kick it over to Michigan. And the cool thing about Michigan is obviously congratulations getting a signing. They get their third guy unofficially. We'll talk about that probably next week. But they're actually the only team to release players and free up some spots for training camp right now. That roster sits at 54. What do you think about Michigan going on right now?
Yeah, they're the one team that had only one guy who's currently available, J.D. Duplain, the I think guard out of Michigan State. Overall, I feel like this is another team that's maybe getting out of their range a little bit. I've heard some things about Dwight McGlovern with Minnesota. Dayton Wade is another guy who's in Baltimore right now. We'll see. Rocky Lombardi, doesn't excite me at all. I think it's probably the Michigan State connection. And in general, I think it's something that we didn't touch on with Birmingham. I don't think they had anyone with Birmingham or Alabama connections, but Michigan and a lot of teams going forward are going to get guys who have some geographic connection for whatever reason. Maybe that's part of hey, these are guys out of our range. We want every recruiting advantage we can. We'd much rather be recruiting the guy who, if we're DC, we'd rather recruit the guy at Maryland saying, hey, you can play, down the street, basically. So, Michigan done that before with Jared Horst, obviously, is one of their, he was the first overall pick in the USFL draft last year. So they keep doing that. It's another team that I think they'll get a few guys. They were pretty good last year at knowing their range, and they got a bunch of guys out of that draft class. Levi Bell is probably the most notable, but Horst and Sean White, there's a few guys there. So overall, nothing too crazy with Michigan, but they just getting guys from local, schools is probably the most interesting thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if people are in love with Bryce Perkins enough to bring him into an NFL camp. Maybe a team like maybe the Rams would if they had a couple injuries and they're like, hey, we know this guy type thing. So you kind of get that 3-week cheap UFL to NFL signing. I don't think Rocky Lombardi makes this 53-man roster or practice squad. I wasn't really in love with him. I actually had him last year getting drafted to the USFL draft before it kind of he opted to come back with it. He was granted a medical redshirt. Michigan does a good job of keeping guys, though. They've kept Deshaun White. They've kept Levi Bell, who very unfortunate what happened to him this year might have ended his return to the NFL for 2024, but depending on the injury. They also had Centrell Latham, Gunnar Oaks came back, Jared Horst. So I think that's a 5 for 10 right there. Some of the guys they drafted, like C.D. Sauer, straight Hail Mary. C.D. was going to get picked. And, Tanner Morgan's going to go through another offseason with limited NFL interest. Maybe bring him. We'll see what happens like that. But Michigan has done a good job of keeping these guys home. Position-wise, all over the place, if I do say so. You got offensive line, quarterback, defensive end. I think we all agree Breland Speaks is either going to be gone next year to the NFL or he might age out of this. Like, how much longer does he want to do this type of stuff? But obviously, Michigan's big need, offensive line. We'll see what happens. I think they're going to need another guy if Marcus Sims doesn't return next year to really kind of step up a little bit, especially with Trey Quinn and everything like that getting older. But I think they're another 10 for 10 as far as draft picks to the NFL, right? Except 9 for 10 with JD Duplin.
Yeah. He's the one available right now.
With him having Michigan State ties, do you feel like that's a guy who's definitely going to be making the transition?
Yeah, for whatever reason, it feels like Michigan is more connected to Michigan State when they're drafting locally. They don't have as many, I don't know if they have any, Michigan guys there for whatever reason. And then obviously they have a few with Eastern Michigan and some of these other schools. But yeah, so.
They had Lano Hill. Lano was their guy.
Yes. Wow, that's a good pull. Yeah.
Yeah. Which his brother obviously was a Battle Hawk as well. But yeah, Michigan. I mean, yeah, his brother was an all XFL Battle Hawk, and then got.
I didn't know they were related.
Yeah, they were. On one
That's
of my
cool.
on my YouTube channel, which you're obviously watching this on, I did an interview with Levert Hill. And I was asking if he was recruiting his brother to come play for them next year because Lano was still on the Panthers, and then he got cut the next week or something like that. Which Lano was older, had some NFL time as well, so I'm sure he's doing pretty okay with himself. Moving on to Memphis, dude, I love this pick. I think Jason Bean. I don't know if he'll be a good NFL quarterback, but I think he could tear up the UFL. Now he's got to be Keaton Slovis for a job, but I don't. You know what I mean? I think this kid is so athletic that he will just frustrate people. I don't know if he'll be a good NFL quarterback. I don't really care about that, but I do care that he'll be entertaining to watch if he does transition to the UFL.
Yeah, this was probably one of the most fun, best draft class. Obviously, 10 for 10 in the NFL, which is something that DiFilippo did. Where I think his with New Orleans, all 10 of those picks were NFL guys too. You talked a lot about Jason Bean, first overall pick. Blake Watson, another local kid, and he was taking.
He was released. He just got released.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. He just.
Oh, I think it was it. Okay, because I think he might have gotten put on or it might have been waived / injured, so he might be sticking around or something like that.
Yeah,
which is another tangent for anyone talking about Alex Magoo. He is still in the NFL. It doesn't mean he won't end up coming available in the next month or so. I think that's likely, but at least in the moment, he's not free agent. But yeah, so I missed that. Jalen Coker is probably one of the draft darling guys. He's one of the guys I was most familiar with coming into this draft. Where Holy Cross, so it's a very small school type product there. Got a lot of people thought he was going to get drafted, ended up not. I think he's a guy who probably is not going to be it for another year or two. Took another local McAllen Castles tight end there. He was at Tennessee. But all in all, I don't feel like I feel like they're going to get a few of these guys. I don't think it's as much of a reach as maybe some of these other teams like a Birmingham. We'll see, obviously, who it is. I think like a Jaquan Shepherd is a realistic get. But yeah, all in all, I felt pretty good about this draft, but especially if you can get a Jason Bean or a Blake Watson, those are the kind of difference makers that you're looking for in a draft like this when you're kind of trying to punch out of your range.
No offensive linemen, right? Except maybe one. I thought I saw one.
They took Andrew Rain, center.
Yeah,
which is the thing is
say it.
They have a center.
Yeah,
that's the one spot they're good at is center. They take one, and it's like a guy who Alec Lindstrom showed he cannot. He graded out so much worse when he was a guard.
Yeah,
and so. I don't know. Maybe Rames next level as a guard. We'll see. That was certainly interesting. I'm okay with it as long as they are planning on taking offensive linemen and making that a priority in the fall with draft, free agency, whatever it ends up, whatever the structure is there. I think it's going to be a draft, but we'll see on that. But yeah, that was interesting. I'll say though, definitely going after a mobile quarterback might also be their way of saying hey, we need to just not bet on offensive line being good, and we'll just take a guy. We'll do the the thing where a lot of these teams just have PJ Walker just run around and sling it. So all in all, I thought it was pretty good. Obviously the offensive line is an issue that holds them back a little bit, but I thought this was one of the flashier, more interesting drafts of the 8.
Outside of offensive line not getting picked, which I'm glad we came to that realization at the same time. I like the Jason Bean pick. Believe it or not, I feel like Josh Love is the only quarterback who's safe on that roster next year. And the reason why is because Flip probably is going to be like, hey, Josh, do you just want to be employed as a football player next year? And you're probably not going to start. If Josh Love is your QB3, you probably feel decent about that.
I'll agree with you there.
Yeah, so it's he knows Cookus is probably cooked behind the offensive line, which is not his fault. They did the mobile thing with Troy. Troy looked like a shell of himself, which was very disappointing in my opinion. So it's okay, you don't run back that QB room at all. I think Josh, Case is going to want to play if he comes back. I don't think he wants to play in Memphis at this point. So it's kind of it's it didn't work out between him, Doug, and Flip. So it's you bring in the Jason Bean. He's battling Keaton Slovis. There's some talk about him taking reps at wide receiver. Does Bean want to bet on himself, go to the UFL for a year if he doesn't get the practice squad contract? I like what they did with with Blake Watson as well. They need another running back. I don't think Cyrus Habibi comes back. He was kind of your fourth option because they got rid of Trey Williams. I'm sure he was a great person to be around in the locker room. Titus Swen, what are we doing about him? Darius Victor, is he past 30 at this point? Your boy,
he's 30.
Yeah.
Go 30. Tigers.
Go Tigers. He's 30 with over 2,000 spring league rushing yards and a couple NFL training camps under his belt, by the way. And he does not look like he's cardioing that much. Let's be honest.
Doesn't need to. It's all power.
Yeah, right.
Just squatting,
Yeah. I mean, I love Jalen Baker. I know he was on the way. I think he's hurt right now or something. He's on PUP. But ironically, he's going against David Davis right now for probably a roster spot. So I think overall, good draft outside of offensive line. That's really it.
Can I throw? You're talking about Cookus here. Let's get nutty with it a little bit.
Let's do it. I don't care.
Case Cookus comes back, and he's like, "All right, I don't want to be in Memphis anymore." Let's say another team has to lose their quarterback just because he doesn't want to play it anymore. You think St. Louis would be a decent landing spot for him? Because I feel like
it wouldn't upset me.
It wouldn't compete for obviously we're going to get to another quarterback that we think will be there next year. But to me, I think if McCarron's gone, I'm not a Manny Wilkins guy. I'm certainly not a Brandon Silvers guy. I don't think those are your options going forward. At minimum, they're in their late 20s or early 30s, so you have to think beyond that. And Case Cookus is too. Like, I think he's 28. I want to say 27. But in general, like, I think, I think if you have like a quarterback room where you have Case Cookus, you have the guy coming up, and maybe one other interesting guy, that's a whole lot more interesting than having a bunch of veterans. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. And then maybe you send, an offensive lineman back or whatever in that trade. But anyway, we can move on. I just got that thought as you're talking about Case Cookus wanting to move on. I was like, where would he go if he was going to, not retire? I think that was could be an interesting landing spot.
Yeah, I definitely think Cookus has one more year in him. Big thing for me, moving on to Houston, by the way, I like the Hayden Gilliam pick, the K-State kid. This is a guy who had some interest. He had a couple mini camps, and what did they do? They took 2 tight ends, one of which is free, plus signing a rookie tight end, AJ Lewis. So I think there's some transition going on at tight end, and a couple linebackers drafted as well. What's your thought? But ironically, no quarterbacks for a team that might be sold on Nolan Henderson, you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'll wrap back around to that by first saying that this draft has warmed up on me a lot since it happened about a week ago. I was really frustrated during the draft when I'm like seeing, okay, another guy not in the league, another guy not in the league, another guy not in the league. And I feel like in general, Houston, when it comes to who they're taking and who they have like built their roster out of, have gotten a little too cute with a lot of what they're doing. Obviously, a lot of that under Vidal, who was their former GM. They got a new GM, gets a new era, and it's like, and we got the same. We're taking, these guys who aren't like generating any interest outside of Houston. And, at first I was like, oh man, the same old Roughnecks. They're just destined to be a bottom dweller if they're going to keep doing this. And I agree with that to some extent of like, I feel like maybe they should have had a better balance of like understanding, hey, listen, take 5 or 6 guys that you feel really good about getting, but understand that those like, your 7 through 9 or whatever guys that you're interested in, they're probably going to still be around and available for you in December. So don't waste draft picks on them because right now you don't have any bargaining power. You have one guy in the NFL right now out of that 10 picks. But then I thought if they're doing this, this is kind of an admission that they just need to refresh this roster. And they have by far the worst roster in the UFL, and it's not particularly close. So, to the point where like they have not only just not had any signings to the NFL, they have yet to have a single player work out for an NFL team, which is not the case for every other team. So they need to just blow it up and start over, basically. And obviously there's some guys here and there that you really like. You like a Justin Hall, you like, there's a few guys on defense, Reuben Foster, if he's coming back, like there's guys there that you like, but in general, like you have to blow it up. And the only way to blow it up is having guys replace other guys. So getting a draft where you're like, listen, these are 10 guys that we're pretty sure are better than the guys we got right now that we can get. Like, we need players right now. We can't be Birmingham taking a player that might be here in 4 years. Like, we need to refresh this roster, and this was a draft to refresh the roster. Not taking quarterbacks interesting. I don't hate it because, like, I don't think they need, like, with the way I see it, like, they have a lot of okay at their quarterback room where they need a great. They need to like go and make a big swing at a guy. And I don't know if this is necessarily the draft to do it in, where like, I feel like in a fall draft, going after a guy that you have a really good shot at, you have the second overall pick, that Memphis just took a quarterback first overall. So there's some chance that like, you're getting your guy there at 2. Who is that? I don't know. Jake Fromm, whatever quarterback, Ben DiNucci, throw out a billion names of who could get cut in August. But whoever that guy is, you need to take a big swing because right now you've dealt with having 3 almost good quarterbacks, to varying degrees, obviously. You need a guy. You need your A.J. McCarron. You need your Jordan Ta'amu, who's just the guy and obviously better than the rest of them, and you need to just roll with them. And so taking another guy who's like okay-ish here or a guy that you won't see next year isn't the move either. So I'm kind of okay with the lack of quarterbacks here because of that. I feel like right now it's like, okay, they've got 3 guys that you are cool with being your bottom 2 quarterbacks. The issue is that you don't feel great about any of the 3 being your guy. So that's kind of where I stand on all that. So overall, like, we'll see. I know there's a lot of talk of the first pick in that draft being the edge rusher who was at Charlotte that had some, was a 5-star that had some off the field issues. We'll see on that. But pull up the name there. Iabi. Yeah, I'm glad you got that for me. But like. We'll see on him. I think that'll be an interesting guy to watch. In theory, this is the kind of league for a guy like that where, maybe he had, some issues in college that kind of makes him off the NFL radar, but, he's still a talent and we'll see. As far as like his fit goes, like they've got a lot of older guys at edge rusher, Reggie Walker, 28, Raheem Bingham, 28, Adam Rodriguez is only 26. That surprises me. Chris Odom's 29.
I think linebackers there. I definitely bring this guy in. A little disappointed that we didn't see A-Rod last year. Like, kind of take, I don't want to say another step, but still have that 5-sack year. That 5 to 6 sack year in a 10-game season. I feel like puts you in a pretty decent spot, in my opinion. But yeah, I definitely think linebacker in that secondary was a more area concern. I'm curious to see what we think of Chris Odom to the NFL cycle. I mean, he might have done this coming off the torn ACL and been like, dude, I'm out. Like, I'm not trying to do this anymore. I mean, Odom played in the AAF. He's played in Canada. He's played in the NFL. He's got the torn ACL. He's probably made a couple $1 million playing football. So he's going to really have to come out and see how much he loves this game, in my opinion, for Chris Odom. But to circle back to what you're saying, man, I from a surface level, I do like this draft a lot because at a minimum, I think 6 of these guys are appearing on this team in 2020.
I think they get 9 minimum. Like, I think every guy –
I hope
they took. I think it's with the idea that they are signing him the second that they can. Whenever the letter of intent whatever stuff starts in probably October, November, whenever. I think the first day you're going to see a giant list of every single pick on this, pretty much, maybe all 10, and they need 10 dudes, which is why I kind of warmed up on it a little bit. But we'll see. Obviously, this is something that you hope you're not doing again next year, because these 10 guys work out and you got good depth, and you're not this team that's getting curb stomped by any good team. But anyway, so that I overall I'm higher on it than I felt like I was going to be knee jerk at the beginning.
Well, it's Houston, the kind of the once proud franchise of the Roughnecks, now into whatever you want to call it. But moving on to the XFL conference, off with a bang, John Reese Plumlee. What do we think about this? Does this mean Holton Ahlers' job is to the wayside? Because I don't think he makes the NFL roster, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think, because he's another shorter quarterback. So he's kind of that Lindsey Scott type more. I don't know how, I'm not, full disclosure, I'm not scouting all these guys. I'm not even really watching these guys. So, what kind of player he is, I don't fully know, honestly.
Athletic.
Athlete guy. Okay.
So he came, and I remember watching John Reese Plumlee at one point kind of burst onto the scene. I forgot who he was backing up at Ole Miss, but long story short, eventually Bo Nix comes along. Bo Nix, obviously first round draft pick, way better. They had Plumlee playing receiver, and he was playing receiver, transferred to UCF, and then at UCF he becomes a pretty decent quarterback. I gotta look up. I'm gonna look up his stats now, because I'm a little curious. But yeah, this dude, extremely athletic, was a pretty decent quarterback at Ole Miss. Statistically, his 1 year he played, very athletic. And then in the last 2 years, transitioned back to quarterback. The dude racked up 1,000 rushing yards as a freshman, dude. I know he's got at least 20-something receptions in a season. But obviously Bo Nix came, and then it kind of messed it. And he played baseball too, dude.
I think you're would it be Jackson Dart at Ole Miss was the guy who came in? Because Bo Nix was Oregon and Auburn. No. But
Auburn, sorry, yeah. Then it would have been he replaced Teamu and then Matt Corral, probably.
Really?
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
I feel like it probably was. It had to be after Corral.
No, it was. They were there at the same time, because it was 2019. Corral gets hurt.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was there with Corral and Luke Altmaier, because I remember Altmaier got hurt, and then he left. He went to UCF in 22. But I mean, the kid's athletic, dude. Rushed for over 1,000 yards in it was under 10 games, man. The kid was a freak.
Yeah, I think when kind of looking at it through an Arlington lens, maybe this is a little bit of a tell with Perez. I don't know. I certainly don't think it's. I think if this is an issue, it's with more of a Lindsey Scott, could potentially be getting replaced more than Holton Ahlers.
Yeah.
But in general, I just don't think that that's what they're doing. I think this is a pick to say, especially if you think he's going to be available, maybe he's your fighting, maybe I would like it a lot if Perez is out of the picture, he retires. If you have a quarterback room with Holton Ahlers, Lindsey Scott, John Rice Plumlee, and you are just figure it out in camp. We got 3 really young quarterbacks, and I feel if that's their plan, I think you're going to end up with at least one of these dudes is going to be a guy for you.
Oh, yeah, man. I lean more towards Plumlee or Scott being the better option than Ahlers. I know Ahlers has a lot of stats and whatnot. But overall, man, I am very excited to see what happens in the Arlington QB room. Couple other guys they picked up, man. Griffin McDowell, he's with the Chiefs. Kalen DeLoche, Popo Amule, he's with the Panthers. Everyone else seems pretty much like another 10 for 10 as far as the futures, like nothing too crazy, nothing really. I mean, outside of Drake Stoops. So that kind of to me tells me that Bob is coming back.
Or maybe this is his last move. Is like,
Well, to be fair, if it isn't Bob, it's going to be Chuck or Jay Hayes, and both those guys are loyal to Bob, so they'll keep Drake on the roster. But nothing too sexy on this one, man.
I'll say one other final thought on Arlington is I really like them taking 2 defensive linemen because they need one of those 2 guys desperately. That room is barren. They really got screwed on Jalen Redmond being there. He was their best player last year and played like 3 games, maybe 4. Did not even get close to playing the full season. Instantly gets signed to Minnesota. We'll see if they are able to luck into another season of him. But assuming he's gone, it's right now you've got Tomasi Lalue, who's 29, Devondre Lambert, who's 30, and then Rashawn Stokes at 26. So really, and then it's just those 3 guys as your defensive line. So they need guys there desperately. So, we'll see if, that's something that like if I was a Renegades fan, I'd be watching those 2 guys probably more closely than any of the other guys on like, hey, are they not getting signed to practice squads? Because those are guys that could be your starters next year, frankly, because of just how barren that room is. And edge rusher too, because that's another group that's just very that's you're going to see some retirements from with like Will Clark, Vic Beasley, both well over 30. Bunmi Rutini, Tuzar Skipper, looking through it, they're both 29. Like you just have Andre St. Amour is 27. Just have a lot of guys that are like in that like could give it up at any moment stage of their career. So with the edge rusher out of Air Force, we'll see if they come available. But all in all, like interesting.
Another guy too that's also, I mean, I would have went heavy on linebacker because Donald Payne's got some miles on
that
him.
too.
Colin Schooler, he's been hurt the last couple of years as well.
Markel Lee's older.
Markel Lee is older. I mean, it's just like
they're just an old roster.
Like, they
top to bottom.
Yeah, but it worked out for them last year. I mean, Markel Lee. I mean, they between Davion, that whole team, man, it's a ridiculous team. Like it really is. They were so much better than their record indicated too. Like they were, really. It's funny.
If they didn't, I think if they had Jalen Redmond the full season, they're at least a little bit more competitive. Like obviously it's tough to say, like, because St. Louis and San Antonio were so much better than them. That I don't know if that makes the full difference, but they were just getting gashed in the second, half of the season. So you just you take a weakness to a strength. I think they're at least winning a few more games. I think they're, finishing with a better record than DC at least.
Yeah, I mean they're 5-5, and I mean, which is good for them, right? But yeah, I mean it's definitely they're a weird team, dude. They were one of the more frustrating teams. Speaking of frustrating teams, this is a team that was massacred last year. DC Defenders. Can we say
Don't remind me.
Oh my God, two quarterbacks, two problems. Flip the coin. Ironically, this is the ironic part, right? Keaton Slovis is going against Jason Bean. So they're playing for not only the job in the NFL, but also you got these, like both, Von Hutchins and Dennis Polian watching that QB battle because now they're like, okay, who wins? Because that's going to make the difference to how we run our season. Because it's going to be that little bit, do we opt to bring Mordecai back? Teamu back? I think that quarterback room gets a clean slate, in my opinion. I do love the fact they brought that Mike DeLeo kid in there. I don't know anything about the guy, but I like the fact he's on the roster.
Yeah, I think when it comes to taking two quarterbacks, I think part of that was reminding that like the first guy was taken in the second round, the other guy was taken in the ninth round. So to me, it might be a thing of like they got to the ninth round and looked at their board and said, "Sure, let's take two quarterbacks." We'll double our odds on one of these guys coming available. But in saying that, I think like outside of Te'amu, I don't want to bring anyone back really. Maybe you bring back DeLeo if you saw something there late in the year, but Jalen McClendon, I like him. He's a fun story. Played well with Vegas. He's 28. What are you really expecting? Any more development out of him?
Oh,
he's a guy at this point.
Yeah,
like
he's a victim of circumstance, dude. Like that guy in college got not a lot of opportunity. 2020 didn't get an opportunity with the Wildcats. They let Chad Kanoff start over him. And then, 2023 gets the opportunity, starts playing well, exciting. And then this league is gone. And it's like, he's a guy I feel could be a top 4 quarterback or 5 quarterback if he's allowed to play. But I don't want him to be my week 1 starting quarterback, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Like he could be great. He could lead the team to a playoff berth. But he's definitely a 10 to 12 to 16. Like, okay, if we have 16 guys, he's one of them for sure. But we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in general, I just feel like at a certain point, it's like, okay, I want to get younger there. Yeah. Certainly as a fan, I want them to put real pressure on Te'amu if he comes back next year, being like, listen, you're going to have to earn it. And if they get a, Keaton Slovis or a Tanner Mordecai, that's getting to that, right?
Yeah.
Beyond that, I really like DC's draft. Like, yeah. I think it's the one of the better ones. Obviously, pointing out, I mentioned it earlier, kind of as an example, but taking the Maryland tackle, I saw a lot of places that like he is viewed more as a guard at the next level. So could be the Liam Fornadell replacement potentially if he comes available. Then, taking a running back, I think that's great. The running back room, I think, is a sneaky need. A lot of people like kind of assume because Abram Smith may come back. Like if Abram Smith comes back, I still want to add to that room because you don't know what he's going to be like coming off the injury. Everyone else there's like, I like the guys there, but like, I'm totally cool with at least adding a 4th guy that can compete, if not replacing like, especially a Cameron Harris who didn't make the most of his opportunity last year. And the guy who I'm like most looking at the moment for like, okay, is this a guy who could potentially like come here and like instantly be an impact is Braden McGregor, the edge rusher out of Michigan, because right now that's another room that's just barren right now. Davin Bellamy, 29, Derek Robertson, 28, Andre Mitz, 25, but like he's fine. I'm not like he's a league average guy. If he's your starter, you don't feel great about it. Really, all 3 of those guys I view as like really good 3rd rushers, which means you probably need like 1 or 2 like actual like high caliber edge rushers there with Leak Fisher going to Houston last week. So that's a big one. Taking 2 linebackers, I also think points to like how disappointing that room was, except for Momo Sinago, who was kind of a surprising ended up being one of their better players. And in fact, DC, I feel like outside of maybe a Michigan, made the most of their players, where the guys they drafted were like not just on team but like actual, Ty Scott, Momo Sinago, Paxton Brooks. These were guys who were like actual impacts on their team last year, which is more than like some of these other teams can really say. But clearly he can't be the only one there.
Because they lost Francis Bernard was supposed to be a more high impact guy. What happened with him? He got suspended.
He got put on the suspended list. We never found out what that was about, but even before that, it wasn't like he was playing that great.
Yeah.
He had taken a steps back. Reggie Northrup fell off a cliff. I mean, he was to the point they were making him inactive, depending on the matchup. Like, he was a complete liability last year, a guy who I think hanging it up. Farad Gardner's been off and on. He's getting older. I don't view him much. They did sign Mikel Jones late in the year, who never played, but is someone to keep an eye on. Maybe more of a future kind of, we'll sign you, we'll give you 2 game checks, but this is basically a camp invite more or less. Anthony Hines finished the season as a starter, but wasn't great. I'm totally cool with taking 2 linebackers and saying, hopefully one of these 2 guys makes it here, because we don't really view anything outside of Momo Sinago as much of anything. And safety too, also. They took a safety. It's just another spot. I mean, really, this is a team that, they were a step away, and then they took 2 steps back, and then it was okay, now we really gotta we gotta cleanse this roster right now. We gotta, because the team that was in the championship is not the team that's going to get you to another championship at this point, or the pieces that are left. It's kind of, we got to be a new look team next year if we're really gonna compete in this XFL conference, which has some legit teams.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Arlington is a couple plays away from being a 5-6 win team. Obviously St. Louis 7 wins, San Antonio 7 wins. DC was hit hard by the injury bug, and, hopefully they figure it out and, build on some of their success last year. And, maybe I personally think where they need to work at is their offensive line. I could see them very much attacking that position. But on the offensive line, I do want to give a shout out to John Yarborough, who, when he transitioned to guard from tackle, played some of the best offensive line I've seen in his career. And I've been watching this guy with the Houston Gamblers in 2022. Even going back to the spring league, he looked like a pretty decent guard, way better than he has over the last couple of years. So I know he was a reserve. He looked, because they highlighted him a couple times. So we'll see what happens on that. But I was happy for the guy,
Yeah, on the offensive line, I actually am not I think they're in a better situation going into next year than they were going into this year, because I feel pretty good about 4 of the 5 starters. Obviously, Fornadell going to the NFL makes that second, that left guard spot a question mark. But Yasir Durant and Jared Williams,
I like Yasir Durant a lot.
Yeah, those 2 tackles got there late. They figured it out way too late. The 2023 DC defenders figured things out week 2 or 3. This year's DC defenders figured it out week 8, week 9. They found their 5, which means that they're gonna probably hit the ground running a little bit. Mike Mietti's at center, he's been their guy. I still think he's one of the better centers in the league.
I think Mieti, I think that guy kind of knows this is it, and he keeps coming back until they tell him not to. I think Mieti, they tell him he shouldn't play anymore. He'll play till he's 35 at this point.
Yeah, but all in all, obviously, I'm never gonna turn down more offensive linemen.
Yeah.
It's spring football. You can never have enough, as evidenced by DC. They lost a couple, and they were a wreck. I mean, they were Gene DeLance was starting games for this team, so yeah, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
I think they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I like David Satowski. That's a guy who's on the up and up that I personally feel he takes advantage of this opportunity, and then next year he has an NFL opportunity. So bringing in the San Antonio, couple guys with Texas needs, 6-4. obviously defensively heavy on that side of the house. What are we thinking as far as with their direction and what? I personally don't see San Antonio losing many pieces. I think a guy who just got signed like Prince Emili, he's kind of a rental as far as with a training camp. So if they want to bring him back, he'll be back. Um, Possibly a reload at the specialist. And I know that's really digging into this stuff, but possibly a reload at specialist because I don't think Ryan Santoso is coming back. I don't think Destroying is coming back because what has he got, like the worst football injury known to man? This is, I mean, I don't know where San Antonio improves personally as a team other than maybe getting a more dynamic edge rusher, quarterback, and tight end. And they didn't draft. I mean, they didn't really draft the crazy edge rusher, But like,
I'll say that Gabriel Murphy, the edge rusher they did draft, I've heard a lot of positive things about. To the point where I don't think is going to be there.
That's kind of where it's like you need a guy,
and that's kind of the and that's kind of, I think they're in that Birmingham tier of cool. They drafted a lot of good players that might be here in 2 to 3 years, but they are not banking on, I don't think really any of these dudes being there. They're 10 for 10, NFL draft picks. Murphy, I've heard a lot about. I've heard, Bo Braid, I can speak personally. First off, Maryland safeties, they love him. That he would be their third on their roster at the moment if they signed him, but they're not going to, because I don't see how Baltimore would let him go this year. I mean, at minimum, he's going to be a practice squad guy, I feel like, at this point. And I think a lot of their guys are like, they drafted practice squad level guys, maybe some borderline 53-man roster guys, not guys that are going to be there in the spring, most likely. Maybe they get lucky with one or two of these guys, but in general, this is another team that is so talented right now that like they can afford to just burn this draft on future. It's almost like instead of recruiting, 2025 guys, they're recruiting 2027, where it's like, okay, right now we have like no seniors. We're doing good. We're going to just push that down the line, and we're going to get a head start when we're actually going to need guys in a couple of years, because they have not been purged like I thought they were going to be. I thought they were going to get like, and maybe they still do. We're right now like day one of training camp, or, some teams just are reporting. So like maybe they end up, maybe they lose both running backs and both receivers and whatever, but right now it looks like they're going to be able to run it back. And so I'm totally cool with just for the moment just saying like, listen, let's throw a lot of Hail Marys and hope we connect on one.
Yeah, I mean, I have their roster pulled up right now, and in my opinion, going off age and NFL recency, and I feel you could lose a Chase Garbers, you could lose easily John Lovett and Anthony McFarland because of the recency. Kirkland's put together a good enough like sample size that like maybe someone takes him. Stevenson's a guy that, he's an NFL draft pick, put together some good games, and maybe Cade Warner because he had a cup of tea in training camp. Like a Travis Tavonian, who he spent 2 years on practice squads. Alize Mack, maybe. Cody Lattimore, retired. Millette, maybe. Rashad Coward, maybe. I know he's got some NFL game reps and whatnot.
Older, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a mid, like, I see a guy like that. You get I call it like the end of the season signing of like, hey man, this guy was in our system. The OC likes him. We need him on. The guy makes $70,000 in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and he's like, do I really need to play spring football to like kind of figure my stuff out for next year? Like, I feel like those money checks kind of like change how people want to do this, and as far as with that, I mean, I don't really know who else gets another opportunity besides Beckett and Williams for them at the linebacker. Tabor, maybe. Like, I don't think they get purged as bad as we think.
I think edge rusher, there's a few guys there. Garrett Nelson is a sleeper one of like someone who I
think I need to see. I need one more out of him. I need one more year out of him because I see it. He plays like a better version of Cassius Marsh, but
that's a crazy comp to pull out there.
I mean,
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Cassius Marsh was just a third down rusher who.
That's a name. I have not heard that name in like 5 years.
the guy, Nelson had a lot of pressures. He just didn't have a lot of sacks. And if you look back at like Cassius Marsh, especially when he's with the Seahawks, he had a lot of pressures. He just never had a lot of sacks. And it's like, I mean, you got some guys who value that, but I mean, that's really where it comes down to. I mean, do you see Tim Ward going anywhere? I mean, he's still 26.
I'll just say that like Garrett Nelson, also known for having dumb penalties. So there's more levels to this Cassius Marsh comp that you got there.
I'm telling you.
But yeah, I don't view Tim Ward as an NFL guy. I think Delonte Scott maybe, Wyatt Ray maybe, Garrett Nelson's the guy I really like there. Maybe a weird Zach McLeod, but that's probably more of a pipe dream, like very low chance of that happening. But all in all, like they're a team that like I think outside of Garbers, Lovett, McFarland, Kirkland, there's a lot of guys who are maybes. Where like I would have guessed that like more of these would have hit by now, and they because they lost Prince Emili and was Emili. Oh, they lost Cole Liavo. That was the other one. So they have had 2 so far, but I just thought that they were going to get purged in a way they haven't. But
I mean, as far as with their team, I'm not really sure like who's on the outs. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know who's on the outs as far as like who actually sticks on the outs. I mean, I think Lovett has the best opportunity personally. I mean, it depends what the team thinks about Garbers. I mean, Kevin Hogan probably I'm going to be honest, people probably didn't even know he wanted to play football anymore. And then they see him playing in the UFL, and then Arthur Smith's like, hey, man, I need a quarterback for 6 weeks. You want to come play quarterback for a little bit? I don't know, bro. But
never say never.
Yeah, right. Our final team, the only quarterback drafted who is a free agent. And honestly, I am this is not the guy for me, man. I just feel like he's a better version of Manny Wilkins, and I don't know what that means personally.
I mean, like, it depends on in what way. Like, if you're saying that he's a more athletic Manny Wilkins, then like that's an issue because Manny Wilkins is a good athlete. It's just that like if you can't throw the ball, you can't throw the ball.
He could throw the ball better than Manny. He's ripped a couple 60 like mid 60s like as far as completion percentage and whatnot. Interception rate was pretty low the last 2 years at San Jose State. I know when he was at Hawaii, which this would have been great if the Sea Dragons were still here, because Nick Rolovic would have definitely taken him. I think because that's his guy when he was at Hawaii. But yeah, dude, I don't know, man. I don't really know if this is the move or not. But what I do know is that at this point in time, St. Louis needs a young quarterback.
Desperately.
I mean, whether it's AJ coming back or not, I think some fresh blood is needed.
Yeah, I think they were expecting Manny Wilkins to, even though he's a little older, be their developmental guy. Yeah. And I think that dream was finally killed when they actually saw him get on the field. And like, he just doesn't have it. And it's like, okay, if he was 22 and made that kind of performance, you could at least say, oh, we'll give him another year. But when you're 28, it's like, how many another years are you going to get? Like, you either got it or you don't, right? Yeah. So I'm totally cool with if this is the Manny Wilkins replacement. The one worry I do have is this is the AJ McCarron replacement, and that like they're gonna go with like Wilkins is the A, and they're like, oh, we still believe in him, and then this is the year 2 or year 3, like that would be an issue. But overall, like kind of zooming out, obviously, like that's the most interesting pick here, but I think they had one of the more interesting drafts because they ended up kind of splitting the difference on like the Houston to Birmingham kind of spectrum where they have 5 guys that are available for him. And they're probably like they're setting themselves up really good to get like maybe 6-7 guys signed because you think, those 5 guys are probably safe bets. And I even saw this is a very random thing that I thought of when I saw Jelani Baker's name, who they drafted at wide receiver. But I saw that Limestone posted that he's the first player ever to be drafted out of Limestone, like in a professional draft.
Really?
Yeah, which is like that's kind of a weird tidbit, but
who's the head? Who's the head coach there?
No idea.
Oh, it's Jericho Cotry.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and you know who it was before him? Was Mike Fleury, who played. I think actually Mike Fleury played on. Mike Fleury played in a spring league. I have to look that up now.
Maybe arena.
He played arena, but Mike Fleury played like he was Ironman in arena, but I feel like he played in the original UFL. But I know he was with the New York Dragons. But Fleury came to fame because when he did play in the XFL too. Yeah, he played for the Outlaws. But Fleury, first off, 1,000-yard receiver out of a small college. I think he went to Northern Iowa with Kurt Warner at one point. They played together. But the cool thing about Fleury is he used to play, like he played free safety at one point as well when he was with St. Louis. Like he was playing both positions, and the dude, I've never met him, but I know he's kind of a boss as far as like he's a pretty good coach, and now he's at South Carolina, ironically, which I think is where Jericho Cotry went to college. But yeah, he went to NC State.
We're getting really off track there, but the Jericho Cotry is another crazy pull there. But anyway, so you're getting back to St. Louis there. Getting 5 guys that you feel really good about. They did have 2 guys get they have 2 guys on Houston, Jaden Janke, South Dakota State wide receiver, and Phil Darius Payne, defensive lineman at Virginia Tech. They were both waived injured. Yeah, I saw that.
No, his brother was waived. Janke's brother. There's twins. Oh. Yeah. So Payne was waived injured. Dude, yeah, no, I have went through this myself.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Homie was waived injured, and then his brother's waived injured. I mean, they're very similar players. They both went to South Dakota State. I mean, I don't know, man. It's some crazy stuff. I do think they will be heavy wide receiver bound this upcoming cycle. I think Hakeem Butler is gone, regardless of NFL or not. I think Marcel Aitman is gone, NFL or not. Shepard probably has one more season. You don't know if Jerome Kapp can play receiver because you didn't let him. Steven Mitchell is getting older.
All their depth is old guys. It's like Blake Jackson, 30, Steven Mitchell, 30, Jeff Thomas, 27, Marcus Bradley, 27. So definitely something that like they have to get some youth.
And those guys don't really have reps in them. Like Blake Jackson this year didn't play much. Jamarcus Bradley, how much has he played over the last couple of years? Like, it's kind of like, what are we doing here, dude?
Yeah. I definitely agree there. And I feel like in general, St. Louis was a team that kind of ran it back in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And they're a team that maybe because of that is starting to get a little too old. Offensive line's another one where they just have a lot of guys who are like, late 30s. And really, you just look across the roster. I mean, pretty much every group has a guy who's like could easily retire, if not 2 or 3. Because they're in their late 20s, early 30s. So definitely a team that needs to get younger. And I think that might be part of the reason why they wanted to split the difference and not, go out swinging like some of the other teams that were in the playoffs did. Obviously, I feel like we got to mention Cody Schrader, local guy. You can take your victory lap on calling that one way early. But
yeah.
But that's a fun swing to take, though.
Yeah. That room's pretty. I'm pretty okay with that room, though. I know Jacob Sailors is gone. That was a great job. Mateo Durant's still under 25. I think he's an early or late birthday. He'll be 25 in either January or December. That's a guy I'd like to see 10 full games out of going into 2025. I throw a flyer for my running back, my third running back. I think we move on from Wayne Gallman. Kevon Latuis, dude, had like 7 tackles in 2 games as a special teams ace. I talked to him and I was like, bro, he's like, yeah, I wish I got some reps. I'm like, dude, I think you made the team last year just based off special teams. I was like, you might make an NFL roster because of that, dude. I was like, I want you to look up Matthew Slater and figure that out. But yeah, dude, like as far as that whole team, pretty seasoned, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean, dude?
Yeah. So if you're being very charitable, yes, that would be the word I'd use.
Yeah.
Old is another one.
I mean, that offensive line, dude, like, I mean, Donovan West and Eric Magwood are your younger guys. Donovan's like 23. Oh, man, I scrubbed three of those guys, to be honest with you, already. Like that might be a little
yeah. Magwood's a little bit older, 27. West is someone who's always been like he came out of college like really young.
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age. Like being a 20-year-old coming out of college is kind of crazy in the NIL era. But
yeah.
I don't know. The thing is just like, okay, all these other guys that were backups, Abdul Beachum, Teton Salties, like these guys couldn't beat out the old dudes. So it's like, I kind of feel like they just need to like, and maybe that was just because they were trying to do the continuity thing with 5, bringing back all 5 starters. But I feel like at this point, like I would not blame them if they just said, okay, let's blow it up and start over an offensive line and bring in like, 4 or 5 new offensive linemen or, even higher than that potentially. But we'll see.
Yeah,
that's not a very St. Louis thing to do, but
But then they cut Donnie Hagman because he was too old, right? And they bring in Andre Schmidt, who played better than Hagman, but
it's weird that like the one team that's like told someone you're too old, so we're cutting you, is the team that like has all the old people.
Yeah.
Like the most veteran Ross. I mean, your quarterback's like 33. Like, why are you the one being like, sorry, man, you're 30 now, too old?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I do like the fact that one of their defensive backs is going to be like available. And I do think that Miles Jones will be available. Tim Harris, a little seasoned guy. Levert Hill, I think he's like coming up on a couple, like 27, but he's been playing for a little bit. Mike Hampton, kind of a later guy. Tim Harris, I think, is almost 30. Like, I definitely think like we are going to transition out of some of those guys. I don't know how old Brandon Sebastian is. I think he's like a 22 guy out of UNC. I'm not really sure.
25.
25. I mean, you probably bring him back. Chris Payton Jones had some great moments, some not so good moments.
Probably – I'd bet on him being done.
Yeah, like retirement or thanks, man.
Retirement. retirement. I think if you can get him back, you bring him back. But because like he also was like the top run defender outside corner, like, and just for that, like even if he gets burned every now and then, like I feel like that's something that adds value at minimum as like a rotational guy.
Well, I'm really
because like how many outside corners are like known for being this great run stuffer and being a plus in the run game. So I think that's going to endear him to the staff at least. But yeah, and I think in general, like in talking about, you talking about guys getting rid of at the back end of the roster, I feel like, especially as we got through all these teams and we're done here and, talking about kind of on a bigger picture thing, I think every team should be looking to replace at least 30% of the roster every year, right? Like especially in a league like this where you're losing your top end, right? Constantly you're getting your top end shaved off. You should be at that 30 to 50% range every year, depending on how bad you are. In some of these cases, Houston, if you get to 60, I'm kind of cool with it. Like if you're really blowing things up and starting over, but that's only in rare cases. Like in most cases, you still have like, realistically, you lose 5 guys to the NFL. That means, you got 17 guys who were starting for you last year that are still around. Maybe you replace the bottom 5 of those guys and you replace those 5 guys you lost. But realistically, like the teams that don't do that, like a DC, are the teams that get left behind more than not.
Yeah. Well, you saw what happened with DC. They had the six retirements, it looked like, 2 to the NFL, 3 to the NFL, the ACL tear, and then just a whole lot of stupid looks throughout the season. I mean, St. Louis is definitely a team that I'm very curious to see how many guys are on their swan song here, man. I mean, I definitely think you got, just naming. I mean, AJ is an anomaly. He'll do what he wants. Wayne Gallman, the receivers I've mentioned, Jawan Bushwell-Beatty, Vidal Alexander, Travis Feeney. I mean, these are some back-end guys, but Elijah Lee getting called off the couch and then having a 12-tackle game in the conference championship. Peta, Drew Lewis, Lakeem Williams. I know he's a little bit younger. Chris Payton Jones, and then Freedom Akin Moladun. What's he gonna do? He's kind of taken a step back a little bit this year after a pretty good 2023 season. Big Jake Sutherland. I mean, there's a lot of transition on this roster that I think could happen. And how many of these guys will call AJ, in my opinion, and be like, "Hey, man, if you do this, I'll do this." But I ain't trying to do this, bro.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a question. And honestly, you have to think about when does St. Louis say, okay, AJ, we got to get the young guy in here. That's,
I think he goes 3 and 7.
Yeah.
Because he was the most valuable player on this team. Like,
for sure.
He showed the most value. And like when he got hurt, one, I think Gradkowski might be the guy who needs to transition. 1, 2, you did see once he got hurt, like, and he came back, air quote, early, like he was not the same player. Like he was number 1 in the league in touchdowns for like 7 weeks, and he didn't play 3 of those weeks or something outrageous like that.
Yeah, no, and I'm certainly not saying like they need to do it now. Like, it's, other teams, I'm saying like, yeah, you've got to tell, I'm sorry, we got to move on. I don't think McCarron's at that point yet, but it is a thing of like, he is 34. Yeah. So it's not like he has 100 years to get, he's not some 22-year-old quarterback anymore. So is he the best option for St. Louis in 2025? Probably. But at what point is it 26? Is it 27? That's its own question. I'm guessing that McCarron's going to make that decision for them at some point, but that is another interesting thing. If he just says like, I could do this forever, at what point do you say, okay, but like in reality, sorry, you're 40. We're not. you can go be our offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, or whatever if you really want to stick around.
Yeah, I totally understand you on that, man. But overall, I appreciate you. I mean, dude, we wanted to keep it under an hour. We failed at that miserably.
Happens.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I feel like we kind of chilled too. That's the worst part. Like, I feel like there were so many more rabbit holes to go down on this. Granted, I think, we could have went to a lot of different places on this, but overall, man, just glad to talk football with you on this fine Sunday evening. If you're watching this, it'll probably be Monday or Tuesday whenever I post this, depending on whatever work's going on. But yeah, man, 80 new players that are kind of associated with this league. Can we get an over under on how many actually play in this league? And what I will do is when we come on next time, I will give you the answer for how many guys played in the USFL draft, and then based off the XFL teams that drafted and their XFL like rookie free agent draft, I'll give numbers based off that too.
Yeah, I'm feeling, and I'm just gonna say sign with a UFL team because, like, I don't know how these guys are gonna do in camp. Some of these guys are gonna go to camp and never make it. Like, we'll just do sign a letter of intent or whatever this off season, or whatever the equivalent will be. And I'm gonna say, I'm feeling like 40, like somewhere around half. Like, I think that's my over under, maybe 45. Because some teams are going to sign like Houston's going to sign 9 guys.
Yeah.
But is Birmingham going to get anyone this offseason? Probably not. San Antonio, probably not. Maybe they get 1, 2, maybe. St. Louis is going to get 5. I think 40 is right around, maybe even that's too high. Maybe it's more like 30, now that I'm talking out loud about it and winging this. But I'll stick to 40. We'll say 40.
Houston messes this whole equation up.
They're getting 9. They're getting 9 or 10.
9, 10. I'm going to go with 43. I'm going to go specific on that. Because we're in my mind that there's already 15. There's already 15 I can think about. Mm-hmm. And then there will be, we'll piece it together with everyone else. But yeah, I'll go 43.
I'll do 37.
Okay.
If we're going to do exact.
Yeah.
I think 40 is maybe a little rich. 30 is too low. I'll go 37.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I feel personally that there's going to be that first, like, there's going to be a wave of these, like, UFL guys possibly retiring that I think it's going to be a group text for a team. I don't know if it's St. Louis. I don't know if it's Houston. I don't know if it's DC. I don't know if it's San Antonio. But I think that group text goes out where it's like, yeah, bro, I'm done. It's got to be one of these teams that's pretty continuity, like a lot of continuity, that everyone was running it back because they're all boys. And then that kind of starts a little bit of a major roster transition.
If we're picking a team, I think it's Arlington.
They are old.
Yeah. On like a run of guys where they lose, half of their, active roster guys last year or something, like something crazy like that. Maybe starters, whatever. They're going to have some retirements for sure.
But that's something. Yeah, that's something we got to keep better tabs on, I think, because no one else does.
If you guys look on my roster doc under losses, they're there, all the retirements.
So excited. So far, it's T.J. Barnes, Trent Harris, and we had our first 2 releases for the Michigan Panthers as well, technically. So opening up some space. But, guys, thank you for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. Had a real nice time doing this, per the usual. And, guys, leave a comment if there's anything else. Hopefully we have an episode next week. That really depends on the NFL if they want to sign UFL players. If they don't, then if there's transactions, we'll probably go over that too. So far, we have 5 things to talk about next week. Really excited to obviously talk about Raymond Kalias and Nick Guglielmos and whatnot. But Mr. Thorn, thank you once again. Guys, leave a comment. If there's anyone you want us to expand more upon. And from there, guys, we'll see you on the flip side. Later.